All right, let's get right into it. Today we're tackling something that is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful but maybe least understood forces in the entire global economy. We're talking about the petrodollar. Yeah, it's the system that has been quietly shaping world events for about 50 years.
Just let that sink in for a moment. We're all used to watching armies and navies on the news, thinking that's where power lies. But real, lasting power, it can be way more subtle. It's written on the paperwork that moved the world's most vital commodity. So let's pull back the curtain on this.
Okay, first things first. What in the world is the petrodollar? And no, it's not some special coin or a bill with an oil rig printed on it. Nope, it's way, way bigger than that. At its heart, it's actually a pretty simple deal, but one with massive consequences. See, back in the 1970s, the world's major oil producers basically made a pact to sell their oil only in US dollars. That means if, say, Japan wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they can't just pay in yen. They first have to go out and get their hands on a whole bunch of US dollars. This right here creates this constant, almost artificial demand for American currency from every single corner of the globe.
And this is where the real genius of the system comes in, because it's a perfect loop. So, step one, oil gets priced and sold in dollars. Easy enough. But then what happens to all those billions of dollars that oil-producing nations are raking in? Well, that's step two. They recycle them. They don't just stuff the cash under a mattress, they invest it. And where do they invest it? Right back into the U.S. economy, usually by buying U.S. Treasury bonds. So think about it. The world needs dollars to buy oil, and the profits from that oil flow right back to help finance the U.S. government.
Now, this whole loop isn't just some neat economic trick. It's an incredible source of geopolitical power for the United States. So let's really dig into how this financial arrangement translates into actual, real-world influence.
And you might be sitting there thinking, okay, I get it, it's a clever financial setup, but why call it an invisible weapon? Well, here's why.
Because when you control the world's #1 currency, you basically control the plumbing of the entire global financial system. It means the U.S. can effectively cut a country off from the world economy just by restricting its access to dollars and the SWIFT payment system. It means it can influence credit conditions everywhere just by tweaking its own interest rates. And, maybe most importantly, it gets to run up huge deficits much more easily because there's this built-in global demand for its debt. It's a huge advantage.
So here's the bottom line. The petrodollar system basically turned the US dollar into this incredibly powerful tool of foreign policy. It's a way to project power and, frankly, get other countries to do what you want, all without deploying a single soldier.
But, and this is a big but, here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. For the first time in decades, we're starting to see some serious cracks appearing in this system. A new word has entered the conversation: de-dollarization.
You see, the whole petrodollar system is built on one thing: trust. Trust that the U.S. will be a fair and stable manager of the world's currency. And, well, that trust is starting to wear thin for some countries. Major geopolitical rivals are actively looking for ways to get out from under America's financial thumb. Nations are setting up direct trade deals in their own currencies. And you've got new technologies like digital currencies that could, potentially, create payment systems that bypass the dollar entirely.
And listen, this isn't just some theory. It is happening right now. Look at how quickly things are moving. Just last year, the BRICS nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, were openly talking about ways to reduce their dependence on the dollar. This year, trade between Russia and China in their own currencies, the yuan and ruble, is hitting all-time highs. And now the really big one. There are ongoing talks about pricing some Saudi oil in the Chinese yuan, the petro yuan. That would be a huge deal.
So this really shows the fundamental shift that's underway. The old system was like a hub-and-spoke model on an airplane map. Everyone had to fly through the central U.S. hub. These new arrangements, they're more like a peer-to-peer network. Countries are forging direct connections, trading in their own currencies, and just flying around the hub altogether. Which, of course, leads us to the billion-dollar question. Or maybe the multi-trillion-dollar question. What happens next? Look, nobody has a crystal ball, but we can game out a few plausible scenarios for where the dollar is heading. So scenario A, and probably the most likely one in the short term, is what we'd call a slow drift. The dollar doesn't just collapse overnight, not at all. But its slice of the global pie, its share of trade and reserves, it just gradually shrinks. Other currencies, like the yuan or the euro, start to carve out bigger roles in their own neighborhoods.
Okay, scenario B is a bit different. It's a more deliberate, more managed transition that happens over decades. In this future, the world moves toward a truly multipolar currency system. You'd have several major currencies sharing the load as global reserve assets. The dollar would still be a big player, for sure, but it wouldn't be the only player on the field anymore.
And then you have the wild card. Scenario C, a fast disruption. This would likely be triggered by some huge geopolitical event. I mean, imagine if all the major oil exporters got together and decided to ditch the dollar all at once. The shockwaves from that would cause massive global instability, and it would almost certainly trigger a pretty severe reaction from the United States.
So just to put it all together, a slow drift is pretty likely, but the impact would be gradual. A fast disruption, total long shot, but the impact would be, well, catastrophic. The future is probably going to land somewhere in between those two extremes.
I know. This all feels really abstract, right? Geopolitics, global finance, it's easy to think it has nothing to do with us. But how does the fate of the petrodollar actually show up in your day-to-day life?
Oh, it matters. It matters a lot. The dollar's special status is a big reason why inflation and borrowing costs in the U.S. have been kept relatively low. If the dollar's role in the world shrinks in a big way, that could mean higher prices at the grocery store for you and me. It could mean higher interest rates on mortgages, on car loans, on credit cards, and it also affects national security. America's ability to use economic sanctions as a go-to tool, a weaker dollar means weaker sanctions.
Look, for half a century, the petrodollar has been a pillar of American power, and you could argue global stability. But today, the world is quietly but very quickly experimenting with new kinds of money and new rules for the global economy. The great power competition of the 21st century, it might not be fought with tanks and aircraft carriers. It might be fought with financial protocols and digital ledgers. And believe me, who gets to write those rules is going to matter more than anything.